Welcome to This is Wealth. On this podcast, we ask, what is wealth? What does wealthy really mean to you? Most of us immediately think of money, but honestly, wealth is so much more than that. If you have health, deep friendships, a supportive family, you have great wealth. My name is Liz Crawford. Get ready to be impacted. Today, I'm joined by Alison Canavan. Eastern and Western medicine and lifestyles connect in this guest. Alison is a former international model. She's graced the world's most prominent runways and magazines, but it's her journey beyond the spotlight that truly captivates hearts and minds. As you can imagine, modeling is not all smiles and beautiful clothes. Alison's life took unexpected turns, leading her through mental health struggles and addictions. These challenges became the catalyst for her remarkable transformation and ultimate purpose, to empower others to live life to the fullest. This is going to be one of my favorite conversations. Alison says energy is the currency of the future. She teaches that the most important currency to drive growth isn't a financial measure. It's the capitalization of your personal energy and that of the people you surround yourself with. Alison is an acclaimed international speaker, wellness coach, and mindfulness advocate. She inspires audiences worldwide with her powerful message of energy management, personal growth, and well-being. Get ready to be inspired. Alison, I am so glad to have you here. Thank you for joining me. The one question that I ask every guest as we start is, what is wealth for you?
Wow. First of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm just delighted to be here with you. You know, growing up, it was definitely wealth is money. That was it. That's all we know in this world when we're growing up. But as my journey has evolved, I'm 46 now, especially over the last 20 years, I realized that wealth is mind, body, spirit, the quality of our relationships and our environment that we live in, and having congruency and doing the work on myself. And for somebody who struggled deeply with mental health issues, depression, anxiety, and addictions, wealth to me is waking up in the morning with a heart full of gratitude, feeling good in my body, loving the life I'm in, and being surrounded by people I love.
Okay, so you don't get there overnight.
No.
Let's talk a little bit about your career and what happened that allowed you to get to that point where you look back now and see what true wealth really is.
Well, I mean, I started modeling at 15. So you're entering into a world where everything is what you look like,
right?
You know, how you appear. So it's not really about what you say or what's in your heart. And it's very superficial and it's incredibly materialistic. And there's actually nothing wrong with that on one level, as long as we can have an honest relationship with it. But as a 15-year-old girl, like, I really thought that my worth was in what I looked like, you know, and my next job, or, you know, where I lived, or being on that billboard in Times Square. And so it ends up being very empty, because it's like, no matter what you're seeking, you get it and it's not enough, and you keep going and going, and it's just this perpetual seeking outside of yourself. And I think my career trajectory and my trajectory in life in general is incredibly important to do the work I do today. But I always just used to look around me at these girls. I'd be sitting in a room of girls, you know, like say for a L'Oreal casting, and I'd be number 140 or something. And you're sitting in this room and you're waiting. And it's actually like hugely intimidating. You're looking around the room and there are women that are like breathtakingly beautiful. Yeah. Like, I mean, just in awe of some of these women. And then you start talking to a lot of models backstage. And I used to do all the shows and travel around the world. And I was just so struck by the deep insecurity, the lack of sense of self, you know, the tears, the beating up on themselves. And I was like, wow, you know, there are people, especially in today's world, there are young people who live their life through the lens of social media. Sure. And we sell them this. I mean, back then, we didn't even have Photoshop. We didn't have filters. Thank God I
We
didn't
only
grow
had
up then.
magazines.
Yeah, magazines, which weren't even as photoshopped as they have been for the last decade. And so I just remember looking at these girls going, what's going on here? Like, what is this all about? And I've always been a deep spiritual seeker on my path, and I have been meditating for over 25 years. And I knew that moving into silence and stillness was bringing up a lot from within me. But then I was in this kind of world where I would go back to my life in New York and go back to partying and seeking, like if things weren't working in one city, I would jump to the next.
Right.
So it was like,
Don't
New
deal
York
with it.
is the problem. My agency is the problem. My boyfriend is the problem. You know, so jumping, keep going. And what I realized is you can't run away from yourself.
Right.
You're always with yourself. And so I kept getting pulled back into meditation over and over and over. And my journey started with, oh, this is food. This is all food, because I saw women who were overeating, emotionally eating, starving themselves, throwing up. I mean, you name it, I saw it. So I was like, this is all food. So I studied nutrition. And as I was working with people as a nutritional coach, I was like, oh, this is not food.
Right. This is emotion.
This has nothing to do with food. I mean, food is like what we're using.
Right.
But this is all emotional. And so I started to realize that I couldn't really work outside of the parameters of what I was trained to do. And my interest peaked, and I trained to be a coach and then a heart math facilitator and an NLP practitioner, which is neuro-linguistic programming, because I'm deeply, deeply interested in human behavior. Why is it that we don't do the things we know will make us feel better?
Yes.
You know, what's the root of that? And there's no simplistic answer to that, by the way. I've been seeking it for years and years. And I'm just fascinated by people. I think people are so interesting and so amazing. And the one thing I've witnessed is that when we give people just a little bit of love, and people feel seen, heard, or validated on any level, which is actually what models weren't being given on any level. You know, it's kind of like you're a conveyor belt, you know, you're being pushed through, and on the outside, it's all shiny, but on the inside, it's very much broken.
Yes.
It's a broken system, and it's a broken industry.
And you're not allowed to be special because there's another one right behind you.
Yeah.
It's amazing. You know, I ask, as I was thinking about this, how can you possibly be healthy in an environment where people are constantly judging you? You're not allowed to fill up your purpose because there's another one behind you to replace you. And it kind of brings me to society today as a bit of a disposable society. Where's the value in anything we have? And so your point on treating people with love, respect, seeing them, validating their purpose. I mean, it makes people blossom right there in front of you. When you stop and say hello to the cashier, how's your day? She's real. She's not just an item there.
I always say to people, I love what you said there, like judgment. Judgment has been a huge life lesson of mine, you know, huge, because I used to say so many things like, oh gosh, you know, I was quite grounded when I was in the fashion industry and I think I came through it unscathed. I did not. Like, you know, I always joke with people and say, there's a couple of books in there of stupid things I used to say. Like, you could probably have a trilogy. And I did. And maybe that was a self-preservation technique. You know, I was saying these things because I had to, because the alternative was just too much to carry. But like the judgment that comes from that industry. And then we internalize it. And so we're constantly judging ourselves. Like I was saying to a friend of mine when I got pregnant, I realized that I absolutely did not come out of the industry unscathed. Like as my body was changing, I loved being pregnant, really loved being pregnant. I have friends who are like, I hated being pregnant. I loved, maybe for the first time, I could relax in my body and allow this baby to grow. And, you know, I didn't have to be so OTT with what I was eating. But afterwards, I was a single mom. And for me to go back to work, I had to be a certain size. And I was like, God, I have a really stupid job. And for me to now earn money to support my baby, and I'm on my own, I have to push myself, pressure myself to get back into a certain size of clothing. And I felt that pressure enormously after I had the baby. And the weight wouldn't come off. It wouldn't come off. Like you know, and
it gets really stubborn.
Really stubborn. And I just remember becoming absolutely miserable, but also all the feelings that had been kind of building up over a couple of decades in this industry all started coming to fruition of how miserable the industry was actually making me.
That negative talk right back in your ear.
Yes. And how I had absolutely had body dysmorphia. Absolutely.
Well, so you talk about the judgment in the modeling industry, but I look at kids today and, you know, call them little models on a phone. They're constantly posing. They're constantly putting out there for others to critique in the comments. And they're all, you know, propping one another up, whether it's genuine or false, but the critics, they're right there. They're talking. And if it's not in the comments, it's in collaboration, little groups talking about, can you believe so-and-so posted that? And so I think about when you grew up, it was confined to an industry somewhat, but now it's across the spectrum with our kids and these phones.
And so we learn to outsource our power really young. Like I totally outsourced my power in my industry at such a young age. Like when I left my house, my happiness was based on if someone gave me a nice comment or not. So like when I was 15 in Paris, you would come into the agency and they would measure you, especially during show season. Every day you would be measured. Now, I don't know about you, but like as women, as we move through the month, we're retaining water some days, we're not. So it's like hugely pressurizing to have a 24-inch waist, a 34-inch hips. And then if you weren't measuring up, you know, and you were doing kind of big fashion shows or haute couture fashion shows, in Paris, it'd be like, well, what did you eat yesterday?
Right.
What are you eating? Like I remember a booker coming to our apartment, our model apartment, and opening the fridge and seeing what was in it. So, I mean, there was literally no regulations then. Like I will say one thing about phones that I'm pretty happy about. A lot of the stuff that went down in my industry wouldn't happen today because of phones. Because people can document it, because people can video, because people, the things that used to get said to us backstage,
I believe it,
and on sets and everything is off the wall. I remember being in Paris and she said to me, tu parles français? And I was like, no, je parle seulement un petit peu, mais, you know, and I was like, no, just a tiny bit. And it was like, oh, I did understand. I understood. I couldn't speak fluently, but I could understand most of what they're saying. And I could tell that she was speaking about me. So when she turned around to check if I could understand French, I was like, no, just sometimes
keep
little
talking.
words like thank you and stuff. She said the most horrific things about me. Not only did she say the most horrific things about me, and it's funny how moments get etched into your memory, but I remember being on set and she would say it, like say, there's all cameras in front of you. She would say it to some of the others and then they'd all laugh.
Right.
And I'm sitting on set and I'm like, wow. And so those moments you go, just, you know, shake it off and go back, but you don't really shake it off.
Right.
You don't. It sits with you. And so over the years, I've learned to stop outsourcing my power, because if my happiness and my worth is based on somebody else's mood, or if they decide that my coat's nice or you look well today, you know, I remember you'd sometimes go and meet a friend for coffee and they might say, God, you look exhausted. Are you okay? And sometimes that happens when we're actually like, God, I actually feel good today. Or, God, I thought I looked great this morning when I woke up, right? So I have learned to do the work internally so that I can feel good about me. And then it doesn't really matter what anyone says or thinks.
So how did you learn? I mean, what was the point that made you take control of your life? And is there a spiritual aspect to it? 100%.
It's the most important aspect. Literally the most important aspect is the spiritual.
Is that where the fulfillment comes from?
100%. Yeah. You know, it's mind, body, spirit, that those three together are so important. And if one is out of balance, the other two are. It's like a three-legged stool. And so you can't have two without one or one without two. It's like they come as a team.
Right.
And so eventually, if you're ignoring one or two or all of them, you will pay the price.
Right.
And that's usually when dis-ease, like when I talk about the word disease, I look at it very differently, because we're not at ease with ourselves. That's what disease is. Dis-ease. So when you're not at ease with yourself, you have to look at all three: mind, body, spirit. It's like when people talk about mental health today, I'm like, we have to stop isolating mental health. What can we do to help our mental health? It's like, no, we have to look at the full 360, because your mental health is affected by your mind, your body, your spirit, your relationships, and the environment that you're living in and working in.
It's a whole ecosystem around it.
It's a whole ecosystem. And so we get very caught up on just focusing on mental health. But my journey has not been one or two stages. It has been an evolutionary process of, you know, really getting to the stage where I remember there was one really, really big point in my journey. I was 32. I was pregnant with my son. I'm a single mother. He's 13 now. And I went home to Ireland. I had broken up with his father and I was living with my mother. Like, I had been living on Central Park West. Life was good, you know, living the model lifestyle in New York City. And now I'm 32, back in my old bedroom, pregnant with my mom.
Yeah.
And I was like, remember lying there looking up going, how did this happen? Well, we all know how it happened. We all know how that happens, how you get pregnant. But I was just one of those moments where it's like, what has to happen to you for you to really decide to take full responsibility?
Yes.
Like, what is it going to take?
Yes.
And when my child was born, I had 50 euros in my bank account and I was living with my mother. Not a very good moment. And it was actually one of those days where I realized I started practicing gratitude. This amazing woman crossed my path. And she ran postnatal depression in Ireland. You call it postpartum here in the States. And I literally did not want to be here, like, at all. I was done. I was kind of like, I am so done. I can't. I don't have the energy.
Right. Wrung out.
I'm just, and she said to me, I want you to write down 3 things that you're doing every day. And I looked at her and I was like, I can't even think of one. Mm-hmm. And she was like, how about you woke up? And I'm like, okay, not super happy about that right now. And people who really struggle with depression will understand what I mean by that. That's not like, oh, me and poor me, the victim. It's like, I'm genuinely not super happy when I wake up in the morning. Like, when I go to bed at night, it's like, oh, thank God, another day is over. I get a bit of reprieve from how I'm feeling.
But waking up is, I got to start this all over again, and it's a struggle. And where do I start? And it's all going to be bad. And
I can't catch a break. And I just can't do this. And everybody always told me I was great with kids, and now I'm not great with my own child. And it just keeps going. It's like
that negative talk again.
Over and over. And if you don't catch it, it will just turn into a tsunami. And she invited me to start writing down 3 things I was doing. Like, I changed the baby's nappy. Mm-hmm. I went for a walk. I fed the baby. Like, I mean, we're keeping it real simple.
Right.
And that was 13 years ago, because he's nearly 14. And every single morning since then, I write my gratitude journal. Every single morning. A friend of mine said to me recently, God, you still do that every single day? I'm like, oh, if you knew what it was like to be in my life before I started this practice, you would do it every day too. There is something magical about shifting into the frequency and energy of appreciation and gratitude there is no other practice I have ever started and continued with that's as magical as gratitude.
But it's truly a coin flip.
Yes.
From very negative to appreciating and being thankful for every aspect of your life. It is a real shift.
And you have to start really small.
Yes.
Because if you're stuck in a place where you hate your life, where everything seems to be going wrong all the time, you can't start saying, oh, I'm grateful for absolutely everything I see. It's like, you got to start really small in the moment.
Or maybe even you're not able to dig into the details. Yes. So I'm grateful for my family. I'm grateful for my friends. I'm grateful for my home. I'm grateful for my job. Okay, what else?
Yeah.
Then you have to really turn over rocks and start to look at, let me drill this down into my life. So much of what you talk about and what you do has to do with being quiet and listening to yourself. In today's world, we're all running around saying, I don't have 5 minutes. Yeah. So how do you teach people to do this?
I was someone who never, ever, ever wanted to be alone. never wanted to be with myself, never wanted to be with my own thoughts. I mean, it was not a nice place to be.
Well, think about every person you know who's broken up in a relationship, who's lost someone close to them, who's going through a trial. The easiest thing to do is not be by yourself.
Yeah, distract ourselves. So even when I lived on my own in New York, like I fell into partying, and even the nights I didn't want to go out, rather than sit on my own in my apartment, I would just keep going out and keep distracting myself. So I have learned over time that the greatest teacher, I think, for all human beings is space, stillness, and silence. And as somebody who teaches personal development and as a coach, there is no getting around space, stillness, and silence. You can try. You can do what I did. I did it. Like, I did everything but sit in space, stillness, and silence. And that is why I'm super extremist. I know that. Like, that's why I have very addictive tendencies. And I'm in recovery 10 years. So I know myself. But that's why I would go on these silent retreats. And it would almost be like forced stillness, forced silence. Because in that environment, like if I'm even sitting at home on my own and I'm doing my meditation in the morning, I'm like, 10 minutes in, oh, that's an uncomfortable emotion. We'll just stand up then and start our day. And like, it's like
session over.
Yeah, session's over. And recently I've been having an accountability buddy who's my friend, who's like, I really want to sit for longer, but I can't. And so what we do is we ring each other, leave the phone on. Mm-hmm. And so we're holding each other accountable, and it has made a dramatic difference. So I always say to people, you do whatever you can to show up for yourself and do the work, whatever that looks like. But space, stillness, and silence will give you everything you need. Like,
whether you want it or not.
Like, you know, it's why they say things like sleep on your problem. Right. Like, wait, because you're giving yourself that space.
Oh, I mean, I think about if people had, so I talk about this at work, that it used to take 2 weeks if somebody was going to fire you and pick up a new vendor, because the letter had to be created, it had to be proofed, it had to be sent. You received it, you got your copy, you thought about it, you either called the person or you put your rebuttal letter together. I mean, there was this exchange that took 14 days. Mm-hmm. And now it's, oh yeah, bang it out on the keyboard and hit send. Yeah. You didn't think about it, you didn't reflect, you didn't think about the consequences, you just let your emotions run. Yeah. And it's created a society that's not really very nice.
Well, it's created a very reactive society. I had a client the other day say to me, she was frustrated, and I get that. And she just said, oh, like, what is the purpose of this work? And I was like, I'll say to you now that the purpose of all of this work is so that you can learn how to respond to life and not react.
Yes, very well said.
That's why we show up for ourselves. That's why we do the work. That's why we practice self-inquiry. That's why we hold the intention of being aware, and we say, I'm going to take responsibility. So look at the word responsibility. I love the English language and breaking down words.
I can see where you're going with this. Yes.
-ability. When I take personal responsibility, I have given myself the gift of being able to respond to life. So now I have the ability to respond. Responsibility.
Yes.
That's what the word means. So that's why taking a deep breath, practicing the pause, and in a world that's moving way too fast for us all, and we feel very overwhelmed and very stressed and very constricted with time, the greatest gift you can give yourself is a deep breath, space, stillness, and silence. Like, most people I work with that come to me have the paradigm, and I just say a paradigm because it's just a story. I have no time. Mm-hmm. And if you keep telling yourself a story, you will keep living it. Right. So in order to change that story, my amazing meditation teacher, his name was Sogyal Rinpoche, he wrote the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying. I used to have this paradigm so bad that I would say, oh, in my head, like, this shows you what a difficult student I was, by the way. I'd be like, well, isn't it well for him sitting up there teaching us? He's teaching meditation. This is the kind of stuff that went on in my head. He doesn't understand my life. And I realized, like, looking back, I was in my 20s, not that I'm making excuses for that, but you know what I mean? And it's just like, there was a lot of my, me, I. Like, that's a lot of what was going on in my spiritual seeking in my 20s. And it's like, as soon as I handed it over to God and was like, you know, what is your plan?
Yes.
What is your wish for me in this earth?
Me, myself, and I are doing so great.
Me, myself, and I. Like, how can I serve? Everything radically changed. But he did something so beautiful and powerful with me that changed the trajectory of my life forever. He said to me, for 3 weeks, I would like you to meditate for an hour in the morning and an hour in the evening. So this is what I heard. I would like you to meditate for 24 hours a day from the minute you get up to the minute you go to sleep. Like, I was like, oh, he wants me to like do it all day, every day and do absolutely nothing else. Like, that's what happened. So I was like, I'm quite stubborn. And I'm like, sure, I'll do it. And I'll also prove him wrong, right? 3 weeks. We can do anything for 3 weeks. And so I started doing it. In the first week, I was still in that whatever kind of mode. You know, I was a bit of a whatever teenager and, you know, like shrugging the shoulders. So week one was there was definitely a big inner battle going on. Right. But I did sit for the hour in the morning and the evening. Week two, a lot of stuff started to shift. And I was almost like, oh man, I'm going to have to go back and eat humble pie. like real big humble pie. And I was
cream
like,
on top.
everything's easier. The one thing I remember noticing is that I was getting through my work a lot quicker. Like I was more focused. And then I started to notice that I didn't feel like I was in this war with time. Like time was closing in on me all the time, that I had evenings. And by week 3, I just had a completely different experience of myself. And
do you think it's because you give yourself time and space to go through all of those things at once? So during the day, you're able to focus on the other aspects of your life, and then you get to sit down again and kind of review them, so that voice isn't nonstop in your head?
It's all energy. That's what I teach now today, is about energy work. So when you give to yourself, you get your life back.
Sure.
So when you give yourself space, stillness, and silence, your entire energetic field shifts and changes. Your energy field opens.
Again, you're not wearing yourself down, you're filling yourself up.
Yes. And your relationship to life shifts and changes. Because if we think about when people are stressed and overwhelmed, we live in a spiral universe. Everything is spiral. So when I'm stressed, think about what we say. She spiraled into a depression. She spiraled out of control. Exactly. So when we're wound up, thinking of a spiral, we're wound up, we're tight, we're constricted. Now, nothing can get in or out when we're like this. It's like...
And you touch it and it's going to...
And you're on fire. And so when we relax, so relaxation is the foundation of energy management. Relaxation. Look at the word dis-ease. When I'm at ease with myself, I'm not in dis-ease. So it's all in the words. All the little secrets are there. When I'm relaxed, I'm at the top. I'm at the top of the spiral. I'm open and relaxed.
It's loose.
And it's when we're relaxed, we're coming from a completely different energy. And so we have a completely different energy to the world. We have a completely different relationship. So everything in this universe is energy. Everything. The food you eat is energy. The words that you speak carry energy. Everything is energy. So when we're stressed and wound up, we have brought our energy in and we're so tight that we have to unwind ourselves in order to do any work. You know, when you try to speak to someone when they're triggered and activated and stressed, it's like
not a good
they
idea.
Can't hear you. And I'll explain it to people another way, which is when you're stressed, you're in fight or flight.
Yes.
And when we're in fight or flight, there was a very real reason to be in fight or flight years ago when we were running from danger or there was real threat. And so your body is super intelligent. It shuts down everything that's not necessary for survival. Now, in today's world, everything is a perceived threat.
Right.
A text message from someone cutting you off in traffic. Most people wake up today and they're in fight or flight. I think the new research says 80 to 90% of the time. Now, we're meant to be in fight or flight maybe 10 or 20% because stress is actually good for us to get stuff done. But too much of anything is bad for you. So when we're in fight flight, the first thing that happens is our digestive system shuts down. I would like to just bring awareness to most people have digestive issues, irritable bowel syndrome, not absorbing nutrients, feeling bloated after meals, feeling tired after they eat. When we're stressed, the signaling system in our digestive system shuts down. So the first stage of digestion is cephalic, which is thinking about food. Then the digestive enzymes in your mouth get fired up. Then that sends a signal down to your stomach, which sends a signal to your bile duct, which breaks down the fats, and so on and so forth. You're stressed. That doesn't happen. So now we're not breaking down food. Now we have things like leaky gut. Now larger particles of food are moving through. Now our system is inflamed and trying to fight against itself. Also, the prefrontal cortex, when we're stressed, is turned off. On purpose, because we're in survival mode.
Right. We don't need to reason it out. We just need to go.
But your prefrontal cortex, oh man, emotional regulation, problem solving. So when you're stressed, sitting at your computer, trying to overwork and figure things out, the actual parts of your body, your physiology that you need to be turned on to help you are turned off. So we're in this insane war with ourselves when we're stressed. This war against stress is responsible for 90% of all disease in the modern world. The first thing we have to do is understand our relationship to stress, manage our energy and our stress, because there's nowhere to go and you can't go anywhere until you start looking at that.
Well, then let's layer on. What kind of food are we putting in our system when we're feeling that way? And I mean, it just piles on top of each other.
How are you starting your day? How do you wind down in the evening? I always like to say to people, think of a baby. We spend time with kids winding them down in the evening because we know they're quite energized. So when we wind them down, we're preparing them for sleep. Why do you think you're different?
Right.
Why do you think that you can scroll on a phone, which has blue light, which is activating our stress hormones still, and then your melatonin, which is your sleep hormone, doesn't get produced because the blue light thinks, oh, it's daytime, still awake, no melatonin. And how would you think then you're supposed to lie in bed and just fall asleep and have good quality sleep? So I say to people, there's super simple things you can do. Start your day, no phone in the bedroom. When I have people, I know everyone's
just like we talk to our teenagers.
Like the most important thing you can do for your health and well-being is take your phone out of your bedroom. Yep. Like it is so important for a million different reasons. The EMFs, the electrical magnetic frequencies are causing your body to still be stressed at night. So much science, so much research around this. Plug it outside and listen, I hear you. I've had all my clients say, oh, but what if such and such calls me? I'm like, oh, tell me more about that. When's the last time they called you? Never?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the last time they called you to me. But they might. And I'm like, okay. So leave it maybe outside the door.
Where you can hear it.
Where if they do call, it's probably not going to happen. How did we survive before this?
Right.
But it's actually, you start to see your connections and your addictions.
Yes.
I remember when I was plugging my phone outside the door, I was like, bye now. I'll be back in the morning.
I miss you.
Yeah, I miss you. And then I could go in the morning, you're still there. Oh my God.
Fill me up.
But it's amazing because for people who have the paradigm of no time and who are chronically stressed, I had a client recently who said to me, I had no idea what a dramatic difference that would make. Because what we usually do is pick up the phone in the morning and we start scrolling and scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. So what are we doing? We're activating our stress response. We're putting ourselves into fight, flight.
And busying ourselves with things that don't matter in our day.
Yeah. Looking at somebody else's life that you haven't seen in 20 years.
or you're reading about things that are never going to impact you.
Yeah.
And you're getting all fired up about what somebody has to say about it.
Yeah. So wake up, take a deep breath, say thank you for your day. Yeah. Practice a prayer, practice some meditation, say your prayers, get into nature.
Just talking about this, I can see the huge difference that it would make in how you view the day as you're starting out. In one of our conversations, you said we make decisions from fear. Talk a little bit about that. And from there, you flipped it on its head and said, okay, if we stop reacting from fear and started making decisions from love, again, different sides of the same coin, but what a transformation that is in how you view life.
Absolutely. For me, love is who we are as beings. We're beings of love, and when we're operating from fear, we have forgotten that.
We're disconnected.
We're disconnected. And we live in a world that sells us fear. Every time we turn on the TV.
Every time you pick up your phone.
Every time we leave the house. It's like there's consistent and constant threats. And so I encourage my clients to ask themselves, am I making this decision in fear or love? Now, when you really sit with that, you can go a little bit further and you can ask yourself, what would love do? In this situation, if it's a relationship, something I'm struggling with, what would love do? And I have found for myself personally that it would usually do the total opposite of what I'm doing.
Right.
And it's really important that we lean into that energy. Fear is a lower vibrational energy, and it's really important. Like, I'm a huge proponent of being friends with all of your emotions. You want to have a healthy relationship with fear, because if you're walking down the street at night and you sense that somebody's coming up behind you, that's a healthy relationship with fear. We want to be tuned into that. We want to have access to it. The problem is that we're repressing and suppressing what we consider to be negative emotions, but we're also operating from the negative emotion that we're thinking we're repressing and suppressing. So we have this kind of strange, contradictory way of dealing with it. The most important thing that I always say to people today is we live in a world where people are afraid to feel.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're just afraid to feel.
And certainly not going to talk about it.
No. And so when we're afraid to feel, you're actually quite vulnerable, and that's where fear has an opportunity to come in and take over.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes sense. I just think about, since we had that conversation, it's stuck in my mind. And if you were to make decisions from love versus fear, they are completely opposite.
Totally different.
Because they're opposite ends of the spectrum.
Yeah.
And love introduces humility, where fear introduces pride. So you start to take other people's feelings and the impact you're going to make on them into consideration right at the beginning versus I'm going to be right. I'm going to do this. Well,
listen to your words again.
Yes,
I, me. We've gone back into the I'm and the me.
Exactly.
And anytime we're in that, we're stuck.
That spectrum is so different. And so it's really, can't say I've put it into practice yet, but it's made me think about where am I operating from?
So transformational. I am not perfect at this by any means. It's a question I ask myself all the time.
Sure.
And it just keeps opening up deeper and deeper aspects of myself, because when you hand it over to love, in my eyes, you're also handing it over to God. You're offering it over. That doesn't mean inaction. Sometimes when I say to people, I'm handing it over, that doesn't mean I'm going to sit in the couch and just wait for someone to knock at the door and figure my life out for me. That's not what it means. But it's like we're also control freaks. Like, we have this incessant need to control everything.
Yes.
And we grasp an awful lot at things we can't control. And we try to control others and control our relationships and control outcomes.
I'm going to call this dysfunction.
Yes.
And we all have dysfunction. How do we identify the root of our own dysfunction? Because I'm sure there are similarities across the board, but what has us anchored may be a little bit different than the person next to you. So how do you help people understand what their root dysfunction is? Well,
the first thing I say to people is there's no such thing as a perfect human being.
Yes.
We're here to learn through contrast. We're here to learn through all our experiences in life.
A friend told me we are all perfectly made imperfect.
Yes.
And that gives you permission to be you.
Yeah.
We're not going to be perfect.
And
it's okay.
most of our behaviors are us trying to help ourselves.
Right.
So I always say to people, you're never trying to harm yourself. You're always trying to help yourself. And they come from so many different places, like a part of you that shut down when you were a kid because there was maybe abuse or something at home, or, you didn't have that healthy attachment with the parents. So we're actually very clever in that we adapt to our environment.
Or we don't know how to deal with it. So we just box it up, slide it on the shelf, and we'll say, I'll deal with that later.
And a lot of the time what comes in to protect us as children causes pathology and disease as we get older, the anxiety and everything. So the first thing I always say to people is awareness. Your willingness to work with yourself and to see your life from a higher, different perspective is the first step that everybody has to take and make. Awareness is the agent for change. We can't change what we're not aware of.
Right.
And be willing in a relationship to listen, to see the other person's perspective, to ask yourself really powerful questions like, what part do I play in this?
Yes.
What part do I play in this? If I keep creating relationships and the outcome is similar each time, or I feel a certain way each time, well, maybe there's something that I can do to shift and change it. And so the only thing we are responsible for is us. That's it. You can't make someone see something your way. You can't make someone behave in a way that would make you feel better about yourself in life. So I think asking really powerful questions, but the willingness has to be there. Like, I work a lot in the world of addiction. And for someone that's been sober 10 years, you cannot drag someone to rehab and make them get help. That has to come from within them. That spark. They don't need to have all of it, right? But a spark in them has to be there of, I want to get sober. I want to change my life. I would love the support around me. But if that's not there...
Right. You can't make somebody change.
Yeah, it's very difficult. It's very, very difficult.
Well, it goes back to you do need that awareness. And until you're willing to face that, you're acting like it's not there. It goes back to being in touch with your emotions. It goes back to living in fear and working from fear instead of a peaceful place.
I just think make your emotions your friend. They're not here to harm you. You know, when we start to feel fully, we start to live fully, because you can't experience true joy and happiness without experiencing the depths of grief and despair that is part of this human experience.
Right.
You can't.
And we're meant to feel them all.
We have to feel it all. We have to feel it all. Like I always say to myself, Henry David Thoreau in Walden said that he wants to conduct an experiment with his life. And he said, you know, I want to know what it's like to suck the marrow out of life. That's why I love his work. It's amazing. And to be able to live and feel and suck the marrow out of life, you also have to know what it's like to go into the depths of darkness. And if that's what we keep avoiding all the time, we cut ourselves off from the good. So you can't have it all.
Right.
You know, you're going to cut yourself off from the good. So to bring in the good, we have to be open to it all.
Yes.
And that's what we're here to learn. We only grow through tension. We're here to learn through contrast. You know, most people will say, what is the moment in your life that caused you to change? It's like, oh, well, I hit rock bottom. Or, I mean, we don't have to go there. But most of the time as human beings,
you can skim rock bottom several times and still get the message. In our women's program, we have a saying that discomfort equals growth. Yes. And so don't shy away from discomfort, because you're stretching yourself and you're going to take something away from this that you need.
Yeah. Yeah.
So tell me, we've talked, you choose a word every year. How did you start this practice, and what's your word for this year?
So for probably about 7 or 8 years now, I choose a word at the beginning of the year. I love the power of language and the power of words. So a huge part of my journey was really watching how I speak to myself. And I've done loads of women's empowerment conferences about how to change the inner negative narrative. Like as women, we are so mean.
We're awful.
We're horrible to ourselves. And like, if you think about the kind of things you say to yourself, and I always say that we are 70% water. And there was a beautiful doctor called Dr. Matsuru Emoto, and his entire life's work was based on exposing water to the frequency of different words. And then he froze that water. And you can look on YouTube. I encourage you to look it up. Actually, we put it in the show notes because it's so cool. And I used to play his videos in my big workshops in Ireland. And so what he did was, like, for example, he took a sample of water from the Fujiwara Dam. And it was, when he put it under the microscope, you could see that it was like a bomb had gone off, you know, it was just all over the place. And then it was prayed over. And after it was prayed over with intention, there was the most stunning crystalline formation that happened. So you'll see in his video, love, harmony, peace, all these words have these incredible, stunning crystalline like formations. And then war, hate, all of that is literally like a bomb going off. Now let's bring that back to you. You are a being that's primarily water. Water is our emotions. It's the symbol for our emotions. If you're speaking to yourself like you're a piece of crap every day, what do you think that's doing to the frequency in your body? What kind of frequency do you think you're holding? You are worth speaking to yourself like you are a child of God, because you are. Like you are divine, you are beautiful, and you are worthy of those words. So I decided to choose a word of the year every year, and not realizing the journey it would take me on. And I would kind of think, where in my life, like, what is it? So over the years, there has been like patience, because I was really struggling with patience. And last year was actually love. And this year is trust. And I always realize and forget every year that your word is going to bring up everywhere you're not living in integrity with that word. So my word this year is trust.
Choose your word carefully.
Choose your words so carefully. Like everywhere I'm not trusting is literally coming up in such, it's also been a beautiful journey too, to surrender and allow myself to move into trust with the flow of life, trust in others, trust myself. And your word will take you on a deep, deep, deep journey within, if you allow it, right? If you decide to go on that journey. And it has been. It's like we're halfway through the year and it's already been a deeply excavating and magical journey.
Do you journal about it?
Yes. Yeah. I journal every day. Yeah.
What all do you journal about?
So I do two things. I do my own journal, and then I also do what's called Julia Cameron has a beautiful book called Morning Pages, and it was actually my sister Laura that introduced me to it. And she says, just get up in the morning and write 2 or 3 pages, just flow. Doesn't have to make sense, just whatever's in you. Usually the first page is a load of nonsense, random thoughts coming out, and then it gets a little bit more coherent. But for me, I find for somebody who struggled with really chronic depression and anxiety, and I was heavily medicated and always trying to medicate my emotions away, it helps me make sense of my world. It helps me to get my emotions down on paper. It's a way of releasing. So I'm always saying to people, however you get it out of you is really important. And journaling can be a very powerful and effective way to make sense of your emotions and what you're moving through.
So from your practice, you have created your own journal.
Yeah.
Tell me about how it's set up and why you did it.
So it's called Change Your Day, the 5-Minute Way. And over the last 8 years, I have moved and changed a lot of different questions around. And it's based on the principles of neuroscience. I am very interested in rewiring the brain. I know that we can do it through meditation and gratitude and different practices. But the one thing that people were struggling with was time. So I literally mean you can change your day the 5-minute way, 5 minutes in the morning and 5 minutes in the evening. So in the morning, there's 3 things you're grateful for, your intention for the day, which is really important, and 3 action steps. And the brain is then going, yes, I did this. The brain loves consistency and rewards. That's what it loves.
Yeah.
And it also loves
that's
familiarity.
how video games have been set up.
Yes, exactly. Like, of course, they know how to get the kids in really young.
Right.
And how to capture the brain. And then in the evening, there's a beautiful sequence of questions that starts with scanning over your day and asking yourself, what didn't go well today? Which is something we don't do. We usually just
avoid it.
Push it down and avoid it. And then we ask, what can I learn from this? And then I'm letting go of. And then we switch over.
Okay, letting go of is really important.
Yeah.
I mean, just from a health aspect of not holding on to those negative things, but being willing to let it go.
My Buddhist teacher used to say to me, not letting go. And he used to say when I walked into meditation, here she comes grasping, which I didn't understand in my 20s. I do now, if you're listening to me from where you are. I do understand it now, and I understand what he was trying to say, because in the Buddhist tradition, we say not letting go is like you drinking poison every day and expecting the other person to die.
Right.
Like that's
they're
what
not
you're
dead
doing.
yet.
No, you're
I feel like hell, but they're not dead yet.
You're poisoning yourself. You're creating this toxic environment inside of yourself. And the greatest thing, if we look at, we live in a world that is forgiving. We live in a world where we are here to be of service to God. That's how I see it, to be of service, because we're all connected. We're all one. Look at the word forgiveness. I think people misinterpret words. Forgiving, forgiveness. So we're here to give, and we have to also, if you're not forgiving someone, you're bound to them.
Right.
Energetically.
Right.
You're connected to them. You don't want that. You don't want that for you. And resentment creeps up and builds on you. And there is no room. Even the best dream in the world can't survive when we're hanging on to resentment and hate and bitterness.
Well, resentment is like it calcifies that thread that you're holding on to and just builds a solid connection to it.
And I have had, God has put me in positions to test me with this, because the unthinkable has happened to me with abuse and various other things I've experienced in my life. So I always say to people, trust me when I say this has been tested with me. I have been asked to forgive the unforgivable.
A friend of mine, Ashley Kinzel, wrote a Bible study. It was called Poolside Journal, I believe. I'll have to get this right and see if I can link it in the show notes. She has the most incredible reflection on forgiveness.
Wow.
It will stop you in your tracks and make you rethink what you think you have forgiven, because it's so much deeper than just, I'll let that go. It's a lot deeper than that to
so much deeper.
Purge it from your system and not hold on to it.
Yeah.
Okay, so you and I can go on for hours and hours and hours. I could do show after show with you. But tell the audience, how do people reap the rewards of what you do?
So I do one-to-one coaching. Everyone can find everything on my website, AlisonCanavan.com. And I also have a membership that's $33 a month. And there's 50 hours of content from workshops to meditations. I'm a deep transformational breathwork teacher. And then I do live classes once or twice a week inside my membership. So there's so many resources for people there if they want to explore, de-stressing, doing some breath work, maybe practicing meditation and taking a little bit of time for yourself.
We did a little breath work before starting the session, and it's incredible how powerful breath work is. I know the box breathing is something they teach for panic attacks when you have those. And so it's amazing the impact your breath has on your body.
Well, I'll give one amazing tip for people that with breath work, first of all, it's free and available all the time. Like you have your breath with you no matter where you are, sitting in traffic, in an argument, you can access your breath. And so it's the most underutilized resource that we have as human beings. But the general rule of thumb is to down-regulate, which is to bring yourself out of the stress response, is twice the length of the exhalation to the inhalation. So if you're chronically stressed, start with breathing in for 1, breathing out for 2. Then as you start to calm, breathe in for 2, breathe out for 4. You get even calmer, breathe in for 3, breathe out for 6, eventually making it to breathe in for 4, breathe out for 8. Literally, I used to have chronic anxiety, panic attacks. Wow. All the time. I also had chronic asthma, was on 2 inhalers all the time and lots of steroids. I have literally healed my asthma. I have no anxiety at all through daily breath work.
One of these days, we're going to find out how connected our body truly is physically to our emotional self.
100%. Yeah.
I am excited to say Alison is going to be our featured speaker at our Women's Initiative event, September 18th. So anyone local to our area, San Antonio, Texas, will be able to come in person and learn more about her. Her energy is amazing, and she will calm you when appropriate and dial you up when appropriate, going back to that spiral. But it's just amazing. There are so many nuggets of great information that you can carry away that can begin to transform your life if you'll give yourself space, stillness, and
silence.
Silence is the hard thing. We'll have a lot of links in the show notes, so be sure to check those. And Alison, thank you for being here with us today. I like I said, I can go on and on with you, and I'm sure this will not be the last time you are with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.